Back at SpreeConf in DC, I introduced the hub to everybody. It was called the Integrator back in May, and it's been renamed to the Spree Commerce Hub. I'm going to just briefly say who I am first. I'm Brian Quinn, as Josh mentioned, CTO and co-founder of Spree Commerce Inc. So, what is the hub? Well, the hub is Spree Commerce's first commercial product, and it's a platform basically to connect to your storefront and help you solve all the complex integration problems that you have. So it's a platform first and foremost, right? We want to simplify the back-end logistics for commerce businesses. It's a platform to decouple the back-end processes from your Spree store, and that's a very important feature of the hub, right? When you're building an implementation on Spree, you don't really want to get involved with bolting in all the back-end processes into your storefront. It's much more advisable to keep those features out and away from your storefront so that your storefront purely focuses on selling, and you can keep your code base lighter, make your deployments easier, and just keep all that extra code out of there, and then move all the complex integrations out into the managed platform. The Spree Commerce Hub is also a suite of integrations, and the suite of integrations there is to help your business move faster, right? So if you need to support NetSuite or QuickBooks for accounting or drop shipping or all those mundane things that we all need to do to run our businesses, then we have integrations there for all those different platforms that you may need to connect to as a starting point, so that you don't need to worry about wiring up, how do I get my orders from my storefront into NetSuite. The Spree Commerce Hub is also a suite of tools. Because we're a developer-focused company, we have two different sets of tools. So it's a set of tools for the store owners to help monitor and manage the integrations and make sure that everything is working all right and that the system is doing as it should. And it's also a set of tools to help developers build integrations and implement custom integrations on top of the hub. But most importantly, the hub is a peace of mind. And that peace of mind is that everything is happening as it should. Right? These business processes are critical to the larger organizations, and the hub is there to give you that peace of mind. And it comes with one more peace of mind, is that we'll come find you when something goes wrong. And when I wrote that line, it seems like a threat. We won't come find you in a bad way. We'll come help you, basically. So we monitor the system, and we will alert you when things go wrong. And if we see that stuff is piling up and stuff is not getting addressed quickly enough, then somebody will really come find you and make sure that we can get those problems solved. So that's one of the biggest takeaways for what the hub can do. It's peace of mind. You can just build a storefront, wire up the integrations, and then walk away from the system. The system will come find you when you need to know about it. So it's a fire and forget system that we're trying to build for you. So what sort of problems does it solve? Well, I'm the Acme widget store, and I have a whole list of different integrations that I need to run. So I have a third-party logistics, so I'm using Shipwire or Quiet Logistics or PCH International or any of these different vendors to handle my shipping. I'm using NetSuite or QuickBooks for my accounts or any of the other accounting applications. I do multi-channel sales, so I'm selling on eBay or Amazon. I need to get all that aggregated together in a single platform. Obviously, customer service, I need to handle support tickets and emailing the customers. Yeah, you can, it's flickering, all right. I shall do an Irish jig while we wait. No. Yeah, I need an offer. Somebody give me $1 amount for the Irish jig. Oh, shit, I shouldn't have said that. Josh, can you get the whiskey?
No whiskey needed.
All right, blah, 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 blah. And then, obviously, I need to do with analytics and marketing, so I want to track, that seems to be skipping still. I want to track my, my sales in something like Giraffe or Google Analytics, one of those e-commerce analytics engines. The hub can do all of that. I wonder, is it my phone that's causing the problem? If I just swap to... All right, maybe it's that. So, talk a little bit about the history and the timeline of the hub. So, the first version went into production in late 2012. Between then and Q1 of 2013, we deployed 4 different major versions of the hub. So, as we learned our lessons with our first test customer, which is Little Bits, which I see in the audience, so we haven't scared them away too badly. Thank you, Little Bits. We deployed 4 more versions and tested it all out in Little Bits. And then in DC, like I said, we released version 5 of the hub, and it was called the integrator. So today, I'm talking about the 6th major version of the hub. So this is our 6th step forward in what we've learned and providing and building a more interesting platform. And today, it's called the Spree Commerce Hub. We've had a lot of experience building integrations. This is just some of the integrations we've built or helped our customers build. The list is ever growing, and we're making it easier and easier to build integrations. So we're off to a great start with the hub, but there's a lot more to come. So we've set ourselves a couple of challenges when coming up with version 6 of the hub. The first challenge was, how do you make it easier for everyone? And when we say everyone, we mean every storefront, every language, anybody who wants to use the hub. We wanted to open it up to more people so that more people could get the advantages of the hub. We had people coming to us with the possibility of re-platforming onto Spree, and they weren't ready to jump onto Spree just quite yet, and they wanted to use the hub sooner rather than later, and they seen the value of being able to help them with the migration. So that was one of our first challenges, was getting it open to more platforms and more languages. So with version 6, it's platform agnostic and language agnostic. Second challenge was, how do we make it more accessible to everybody? So we wanted to make it simpler. We had some early issues with people just kind of being able to understand the hub and all the features. It was a powerful platform, but there was also a bit of a learning curve there. So we've really spent a lot of time looking at the core features of the hub and trying to figure out how do we bring that back to the bare essentials so that people can understand it quicker and people can get up to speed with it quicker and can get productive with it quicker. So challenge accepted. So our answer to those challenges are, we're focusing on what we call our simplified API, and we're striving to build the API for e-commerce. So we have three core terms for the version 6 of the hub. We have an object, and an object is just a JSON representation of something, an order, a product, a customer, a shipment, anything in the commerce space or vendor-specific space. An event is just an interesting change to an object. So an example of an event would be a customer completing an order or an order shipping or a new product being created. And then a webhook, right? A webhook is just a HTTP post to a predefined URL. So with these 3 terms, that's the hub. That's all that the hub is. It can be boiled down to 3 basic terms. So we're going to look at these 3 basic terms and we're going to match them into the 5 different use cases that we have. So the first one is third-party logistics. The use case here is, I want to tell my 3PL whenever there's a shipment ready to fulfill. So in this case, the shipment is an object, the event is a shipment-ready event, and the webhook is the add shipment webhook. And we'll get into webhooks in detail later. And this is true for Shipwire, for Quiet Logistics, for PCH, for whatever third-party logistics provider. They can all follow the same pattern. It's a repeatable pattern, and it's simple to understand. So I want to update my store when a shipment has dispatched. Again, still a shipment object. This time the event is actually a scheduled event. So you just say, I just want to check for my shipping events every 5 minutes or 2 minutes or whatever. And you can poll the different providers for that shipping information. And in this case, the webhook is a get shipments webhook. All right, I want to update my store with my 3PL stock levels. So now we're talking about the inventory object. Again, it's a scheduled event, and we're just calling the get inventory webhook. So you can see patterns beginning to emerge here. We swap over to accounting and ERP. I want to keep my accounts up to date with all orders from my storefront. Object is an order, event is the order created, the webhook, again, add order, right? And again, NetSuite, Open ERP, QuickBooks, Xero, whatever your accounting or ERP system is, can follow that exact same pattern. And obviously, we have the updated events to go along with the created events as well. So we have order updated, and we have the update order webhook. All right, I need to import products to my ERP to my storefront. So now we're onto the product model, or the product object. Again, it's a scheduled event, and there's the get products webhook. Multi-channel sales. I like to consolidate and process all my orders on a single platform. We're talking about orders and pulling orders from all these different platforms onto the hub. So it's the order object. Again, it's a schedule, and the webhook is just get orders. And again, that could be Amazon, eBay, Etsy, wherever. Another important one for multi-channel sales is keeping stock, right? I want to keep my stock in sync across all my sales channels. So the object here is the inventory object. The event is the inventory updated event, and the webhook is set inventory. Communications, this is an interesting one. So I want to send a user an email after they've completed an order. So again, it's the order object, and it's the order created event, and it's a kind of a more specialized webhook here, a send email webhook. And we'll get into more details of that later on. And again, it's the same pattern that applies to all the different email sending services, be the rich services like Mandrill or ExactTarget, or simpler like the Amazon SES services, right? Use the same pattern. And again, I want to send an email to the customer when they cancel their order. So again, it's the order object, but this time it's the order canceled event. And again, we're calling the same webhook the send email webhook. And again, I want to send a user an email after their order ships. So now we're talking about the shipment object. It's a shipment confirm event. And again, we're still calling the same send email webhook. And an interesting one to swap is, okay, I don't want to send an email, I want to send an SMS, right? So the object stays the same, the event stays the same, the webhook changes. So again, you can see these patterns beginning to emerge about 3 simple terms, and you can map pretty much every use case that we've come across using these 3 simple ideas. Customer service, you need to create a support ticket for high-risk orders. Again, it's an order object. After the order has been created, we call it create ticket webhook. And again, Zendesk, Salesforce Desk, Tender, whatever application you're using for customer service. So, quick summary of what we've looked at there. So we looked at 5 different business areas, 13 different use cases across 15 different vendors, and they're all solved with the 3 basic ideas we've come up with, or objects, events, and webhooks. So we're going to look at all those in detail. So, objects. The hub, the version 6 of the hub is all about objects, right? The objects are the core of the system. It's an object-oriented system. And those objects can be anything. They can be orders, they can be shipments, they can be customers, carts, or anything you need to run through the hub. Basics about an object. So I said before, an object is just a big chunk of JSON. We have predefined schemas, which we'll talk about later on. But at the bare minimum, each object just requires an ID field. And then after that, you can put whatever you want into the object. And we also suggest that you include a status field to track the object state. And we'll see some of the use cases for that later. Some of the most common objects we're dealing with right now, obviously orders and carts, products and customers, shipments, payments, returns, inventory, and you've seen some of those in our use case examples. We take a quick look at what the structure of the order object is. Obviously, you see all the usual suspects there. Some of the attributes are like single key value attributes. Some of them are more complicated objects, like the line items and billing and shipping addresses. A quick look at what the JSON looks like. You know, simple to understand. We've boiled it right back down to what we found with our experience at the hub over the last 18 months of what details these integrations need in order to be able to meet the requirements. And we've come on a nice, pretty standard set of data there, and it's really easy to understand. So we said objects have a schema, and we're trying to build this API for e-commerce. So we are creating a public schema for the JSON representation of core commerce objects like orders and products and customers, and we're making that available to you guys to use. I've nicknamed this format the Hub Official Format, or the HOF for short. So the order JSON schema. So there's a quite interesting emerging standard for describing JSON, using JSON, kind of like, I guess, what's the XSLT? No, what's the XML version of that? XSLT, yeah, I was going right. So yeah, so you can use JSON schema, which is the same. You basically just get to describe the structure of an object, and we've created JSON schema documents for all the kind of common objects, and we've been refining those over time. We've got a pretty good set of schemas defined now. So we know what objects look like. How do we see the objects, or what do the objects look like? So once you're signed up to the hub and you're a hub customer, you can go to hub.app.io. You can sign into an account. Don't bother going there now. It's just a login screen you're going to see. But once you're logged in, you have access to this data tab here. And across the right-hand side, you can see all the different objects that you have sent onto the hub. You can see a summary of the objects that are pushed. So we're looking at products there. You can see the product name and price, and that flicker is driving me crazy. If you drill down and say, look at an order, for example, you get a summary of the order across the top, when it first arrived on the hub, when it was last updated. You can see notifications, so what has the hub done for this particular order? So in this case, you can see it sent a manual email, it added the person to a MailChimp mailing list, and you can see actually there's a failure happening there trying to get the order to...
You want to try my laptop?
It's the slides are on iCloud, so it won't, yeah. So you can see there's a problem there with the orders going to 0. And we'll get into order troubleshooting or troubleshooting later. And again, you can come across the details tab there and see the JSON representation of that object as it lives in the hub right now, the most current version of it. So I've talked a lot about objects and the kind of the standard objects that we have, but one of the most powerful aspects of the hub is that you can take our format and build on top of it. Just the way you can take Spree and build on top of Spree, we've taken that ethos with us across to the hub, and we're trying to make the hub as extendable as Spree is. Even though the hub is a proprietary platform, it's a paid platform, we're taking our skills and our experience from the Spree store and we're pulling it across onto the hub, and we want to keep that with us in the hub. So looking at extending objects on the hub, so again, we're just looking at the order object here. So once you maintain the basic structure of an object, you can decorate it at any level that you want, and you can make those decorations as simple as you want. So in this case, we're just adding a single attribute, or you can add a complex object attribute, or you can add arrays, or you can do that at any level of the structure the whole way down. And once, like I said, the basic structure is maintained and validates, then all that extra data will just travel through the hub. So if you're building a custom integration that requires custom data, that information can just travel through, no problem. You can also send completely custom objects to the hub. So you don't just have to send orders or customers or whatever. So if you happen to be in the pirate management business, you can push pirates to the hub, and the hub can just deal with pirates. It knows how to create pirate-created events and pirate-updated events and track changes to the pirate object. So it's completely flexible in that respect. So we know what objects look like. We know that we can have our own objects. So how do you get objects into the hub? This is a new feature for version 6 where we're creating a push API. And it's a very, very simple push API. You will push to push.hubapp.io. It's secure, it uses a unique token per push, and we'll see that later on. It's fast, we don't validate synchronously, it's all done asynchronously, and it's customizable, so like I said, you can push custom attributes and objects, and it supports partial updates, and we'll see that in a minute. So the idea here is that any platform, be it Shopify, Magento, PrestaShop, BigCommerce, whatever, custom PHP, custom Java, whatever you happen to have, once you can create a bit of JavaScript and throw it at the endpoint, you can get it onto the hub. So it's really lowered the barrier of entry to getting different platforms using the hub. A quick example of the push here. So we're doing a post on the left-hand side. You can see we're just sending an array of orders, and the response you will get back on a 202 is just saying this is the number of orders that we've received. So we're not giving any validation information back at this point. It's purely we've accepted the order and we'll validate it later. It was important to us that we keep the push as fast as possible so that if you guys are doing it inline or in a batch process, that you can send a lot of information to us very, very quickly. So it's very, very minimal overhead on the API front. You can push multiple orders at the same time, like I said, so it's just an orders array. So in this case, we're pushing 2 orders. It just says, okay, we've received 2 orders. That's all you get back. You can push multiple different objects. So in this case, we're pushing orders and products, and you get the count back at the different objects. And then like pushing a custom object, so we push 1 pirate, we get the count 1 pirate back. So the push API can also do partial updates. So instead of sending us all the information each time about an object, you can just give us the data that's changed. So the first push there, we see this is the full order coming through, and it's just been abbreviated. On the second push, then, we're just changing the status from complete to cancelled, right? So all we need to push is the ID, what the identifying value for that object is, and what attributes we want to change. And then the hub will take care of merging that information back together and creating the complete picture. A couple of caveats here is that you can't actually delete information from the hub. If you want to unset a value, you just need to pass null for that value, be it an array or an object. You can null it out in that respect. If you're sending a partial update and you're sending us, you want to change an array of objects, you need to send us the entire array of objects back again. And we're looking at adding improvements to the partial push. But again, this is all about speed, right? It's about cutting down the amount of information that you need to send us, cutting down the processing time so that we can get that push from you quickly and get your storefront back to selling and stop focusing on the integration aspect. So a little bit about the authentication mechanism that we're using for the push API. So we use HMAC, which is the hashed message something, I'll look it up later. It's basically, you take the JSON that you're about to push, a pre-shared secret key, and the timestamp that you're sending it, and you just aggregate those together, and you create a token using a SHA-1 hash. And that uniquely identifies who's sending the data, what the data is, and when you sent it, so that if somebody were to get your secret key, they can't push any data to the hub. They can only literally push the exact same piece of JSON that you wanted to push, and only within a very small time frame window. So it's a very, very secure system, because that's the gateway to the whole system, so it needs to be secure. So like I said, each push is only valid for the body you intended and for a small time window. Here's a quick Ruby implementation of how you might do that. So all your variables above there, your store ID, your secret key, the timestamp, creating the JSON, you aggregate the JSON payload with the timestamp, Ruby has built-in mechanisms for creating H1 or SHA-1 HMAC digest. So you just initialize the values, and then you're just posting the data to the hub, and you're setting a few headers. And I just realized the URL is wrong, so ignore that URL. So push support for Spree, we're going to build in push support into Spree 2.3. There will be a new core gem in there with all the ones that Jeff showed off earlier on. You will have a Spree_hub gem. It will be disabled by default and only activated by a preference, so it's not going to have any impact on your store if you're not using the hub. It will include both push and webhooks, and we'll cover the webhooks later on. And the plan is that we will backport that all the way to 1.3. So the last part I want to talk about push is that push is a very, very important part of the system, so we're making it very, very high availability. We're already working on rolling out points of presence or push servers all over the world so that we will never be down when you need to push data to us. The access to the push nodes is handled via a geo-redundant DNS, so when you resolve push.hubapp.io, it'll give you the closest push server that's currently available to you. So again, it's all about getting the data into the hub as quickly as possible and being fault tolerant so that you know that you can just push to us and you don't need to worry about us being down. We'll always be available to take the push data from you. So that's objects and pushing objects onto the hub. The next part I want to talk about from the 3 core ideas are events. And events are an interesting change to an object. So I like to think of events as little sentences and things that are happening, right? Tom has completed an order for 3 shirts. Tom's order has been dispatched. A new user called Jane has registered, added a hat to her cart. All these kind of things, right? This is what's happening in your store right now, if you have stores right now. These are all these interesting events that are happening. So the hub is all about capturing these events, capturing that data, and then doing interesting things with it, right? But behind the covers, an event is really just a change in data, right? Somebody adding something to a cart is just a new line item popping up on a cart. So it's all about changes to data and understanding what those changes mean and correlating those changes into events. So events are created as objects changed. And right now, there's 2 basic ways that events are generated. The first one is automatic, so it's created versus updated. So the first time we see a pirate, we will create a pirate created event. The second time we see a real change to that, we will push a pirate updated event. And then we have an event builder UI, which allows you to create custom events, and we'll see that in a second. And then basically events are used to connect objects to webhooks, so they're the glue in between the 2 parts of the system. So created versus update. Like I said, the first time we see it, it's created. The second time we see an object and it's a real change, i.e. we do a diff to make sure something has actually changed, we will raise an updated event. The events builder UI, easy way to create events. So on there you basically say what object you want to observe for changes. You say what the new event is going to be called, so it's completely up to you. You have a sample JSON structure on the right-hand side from your store, so you can say, when the line item is, you pick an operator basically saying, so when the line item is less than $50, you want to create an order cheap event or something like that. So you have that flexibility to build up all these custom events, and this is true for both the official objects and the custom objects that you're pushing to the hub. So there's a very, very simple but flexible eventing model built in there. Like I said, events trigger webhooks. And it's basically how objects flow through the hub, right? If you think there's an object coming in to the push API, the events have been triggered, and then the events trigger the webhooks, so that's the flow of information through the hub. So an example would be on the event here on the left-hand side, we have a shipment ready event, and that's mapped automatically to the add shipment webhook, which is obviously going to Shipwire in this case. Order created goes to the add order webhook automatically. The shipment confirmed would be mapped to the update shipment webhook. So I just want to talk briefly about evented processing and what that means for the storefront, because this is an important aspect of the hub. Like, this evented model is very, very important for decoupling processing from your storefront. Like, one of the first things that when you're building a Rails app, if you're sending email, you have to take that email sending and put it in a background process, right? And then you're ultimately responsible for babysitting that background process forevermore. So when you get into the more complex workflows of a storefront, you're sending orders to NetSuite and all these different places and to drop shippers. The number of background processes you have to be worrying about becomes astronomical if you're doing it correctly in an evented way. So the hub really helps you there, and it gives you a pattern to follow to get this evented processing, get it out of the flow of the customer, so that the customer flow is not distracted by all the processing that needs to happen. And obviously, it's a big win for scalability when you get all that additional stuff out of your main application just happens elsewhere. It means your storefront can scale a lot better. So the third and final kind of core idea are webhooks. And webhooks are all about getting the objects back out of the hub. So we've pushed them in, we've generated events, and now we want to get them out. We want to do interesting things with the objects. So the goal for the webhooks are we wanted to create a common set of patterns for processing events. We wanted it to be well documented. We wanted them easy to test. And we basically wanted to make integration development even easier than it was in previous versions of the hub. So for webhooks and sending objects, we've created a standard set of naming conventions, and you've seen that before. This is just our suggested naming pattern for webhooks. So an add underscore object will alert the target system of a new object. So if you're telling NetSuite there is a new order. The update underscore will send any changes to those objects, and then the get underscore will poll that targeting system on a schedule for any changes that might be happening in that target system for those objects. So what that looks like, okay, order, add order, update order, get orders, right? Same for products, same for customers, and it's exactly the same for custom objects, right? So you have add, pirate, update, pirate, get pirates. So in other places, then we don't follow that pattern. So in cases where it doesn't make sense, you don't need to follow that pattern. So for inventory, it's as simple as get inventory and set inventory. And then for the communications ones, we have like send email, send SMS, create ticket, add to list. The webhook names we suggest are just a naming pattern. You can create any webhook name that you want, any URL you want to use. This is just the standard that we're suggesting. So how do you implement a webhook? Well, a webhook is really just a HTTP post. So any application that's capable of processing a HTTP post can be an integration on the hub. So you can use any language or framework that you want. It can be a standalone application, or it can just be a route on a larger application. It needs to talk JSON, and we'll see some examples of that in a minute. And obviously, you can host it anywhere. It doesn't need to be in the same data center as the hub or anything like that. So here's an example of the add order webhook. So we've seen the order come into the hub, and now we're sending that order back out to an integration to deal with that, right? So each request has its own unique request ID, and this represents in this case, it's an order created event that's after happening, and this is the unique representation of this particular order created event. So it has a request ID, and then there's the order object that was pushed in. And the response that integration needs to give back is a standard HTTP 200 response saying everything went okay. You need to give us back the request ID that we sent you, and then just a basic one line, what happened, right? It's as simple as that. Tell us what the summary was and what request you just processed, and that's it. That's the pattern you need to follow to start integrating with the hub. All right, update product follows the exact same thing. In this case, the main payload of the post is a product object. You give us back the exact same two pieces of information, the request ID and a small summary. And those summaries, what you've seen earlier on when we're looking at the object in the hub interface, we're looking at the notifications. Those notifications get presented there against the objects. All right, parameters. So integrations for the hub are designed to be multi-tenant so that any configuration information that you need gets sent along with the request. So in this case, if we were sending, say, an order created to our QuickBooks endpoint, we'd send along all the QuickBooks credentials along with each single request that we send to that integration. And the thought behind that is that the endpoint application can be a dumb application. It doesn't need to store any configuration. It gets everything it needs to do to process that request in that request. So there's no local configuration. You can basically deploy a webhook onto any platform, and the integrations basically become disposable because they don't need any local state at all. So there's the parameters. And again, the same response. In certain cases, the parameters are more important when you're doing a polling request. So in this case, if you're fetching customers from a target system, we would pass the since variable, which you can see is a timestamp there. And then when the response comes back, you would give back an array of customers that you want to send back into the hub. So it's kind of like it's a poll on the reverse side of the push, and it has the same features of the push so that you can just return like the partials, stuff that have changed. So in this case, we're returning back 2 customers, and you can see we're returning back different attributes for each customer. So we're just returning back the changes for those objects. But we also can return back the parameters. So you can see the since came in there and it was 29 minutes past 5, but when we're sending it back, we're saying this is the new timestamp that you should send us on the next call. So that the hub will take back that configuration variable, and the next time we poll for customers, we will use that timestamp. So again, it removes any need for state inside the integration applications. So what happens in case of an error, right? So we send the post to you, but something goes wrong. So obviously the application can blow up and just give us back like an Nginx or a standard HTTP 500 error, and that's fine. The system will deal with that. But if you want to provide some insight into what actually went wrong, say the password was wrong or the configuration is incorrect, right? You return back the same request ID, and you still return the same summary string, but you return that in a 500 HTTP code, so the hub knows that this work has not been done and something has gone wrong, and you can get that error notification back into the system so that the system knows there's a failure and it can start monitoring for more instances of that same failure. So I'll talk quickly about how we do authentication for integrations. So each webhook, the post that we send includes the following headers. So we send 2 different headers. We send the store ID that this message belongs to, or this event belongs to, and we send the token, which is just a pre-shared key. So that basically identifies the hub as the person who's sending the request to the endpoint, so that you know that the request is coming from the hub and not somebody using curl. We provide an endpoint-based library. The endpoint-based library basically just helps create endpoint applications or integrations simpler. It supports both Sinatra and Rails endpoints and provides basic authentication, helper methods, and variables. It'll pull out the payload of the event and also the configuration variables for you. It has a nice response DSL and also handles the rendering of the responses back to the server. Check out the documentation. It's on GitHub if you want to see it. So we look at just the hub in action, and we've looked at all the 3 different kind of main objects. Now we're just going to cover some other kind of interesting patterns that the hub uses when dealing with the integrations. So the first one we're going to look at is handling failures and how the hub deals with retrying failures. So the most basic pattern is you push an object, in this case an order, to the hub, it creates an order created event, and then the hub will try and route that event out to say, in this case, the NetSuite integration. We will call the add_webhook, and the NetSuite integration will give us back a 500 failure. And we've seen what that looks like in the JSON before. It's just the same JSON we get back, but with a 500 HTTP code. So the standard pattern for retry is a backoff, right? So the hub will just keep retrying the same message over and over in the hope that it was the NetSuite integration that was down or there was some problem, and eventually we'll get a failure. So between each time we retry, we step back twice as long. So we retry immediately, then we retry within 30 seconds, and then 60 seconds, and so on and so forth. And hopefully eventually we'll get a success response back, and that job will be done. The new retry pattern we're implementing in version 6 is what we're calling auto recovery. So the first version of the order arrives onto the hub. We have an order created event, and we start using the standard exponential backoff routine. But in the meantime, a new copy of that order arrives, right? Maybe fixing some skew or some value that was wrong on the initial version of the object. So the original event gets updated with the new details, and then when we retry the next time, we actually retry immediately after the new push arrives. And in that case, we fix the data problem so the event gets processed correctly by the system. And then the other kind of fallback strategy then is no retries, where it could be dangerous to retry a particular action. If you're capturing a payment or something like that, you don't know where the failure might happen, you can just disable retries altogether. And in the case then that there is a no retry, you can come into the hub UI again, and you can be looking at your objects. So you can see here the hub is drawing our attention that there's 15 orders that need attention, right? So there's 15 orders in the system that the hub cannot get through. You know, there's either it's been failing for a period of time, or there has been no retries allowed. You can drill down to the individual objects. You can see here at the bottom the 0 export is not working for some reason. So you can see we've attempted it 5 times. The next attempt is in a few minutes. But we also give you this resolve option here, and we bring you into what we call our error resolution workflow. And that gives you a couple of different basic options. So the first one is that you can edit the data directly in the hub. So if you know there's a small data problem and you don't expect an update to come from, you can just jump in and fix the data right there. The second option is that you can just manually mark the problem as solved, so you know that whatever has happened is just not going to be resolved, and you just want to get this error out of your way. You just mark it as done, and it will disappear off the list. If you see the error coming back as like a configuration error, you can jump straight to the credentials and configuration for that integration, so you know that you typed in your QuickBooks password wrong or something like that. You can jump in there. And the fourth option is you can contact Spree support for help, so you can open up a Zendesk ticket directly with us from inside the Hub application, and some of our support team will help troubleshoot what's going wrong with this particular event for you. So looking at the first option, editing the data, you see the object exactly as it is, and you can see here in this case the SKU was supplied wrong. It was using underscores instead of minuses, for example. So you can just make that change, edit the SKU right there, and you'll see when you come back out of the object, you see it's pending resolution. So the hub knows something has happened. It's going to retry it immediately, and then you can see it's resolved, right? So it gives you the tools to basically solve the problems as they're happening. It'll draw your attention to the areas that need your attention, and it will alert you when we see lots of failures in a particular area. If we see a big spike in order failures, we'll send you an email or an SMS or whatever we need to do to find you to say, you know, all your orders are no longer going to QuickBooks or have failed, or you're not going to your dropshipper. So we're building that intelligence into the system as well. The last feature I want to look at is macros, and this is kind of an interesting feature that we've had in beta in version 4, and it's going to be a more prominent feature, in version 5, and a more prominent feature in version 6. So macros are basically embedded JavaScript functions that you can supply that will do interesting things inside the hub. So one of the first use cases for a macro is you basically apply it to the payload that we're about to send to an endpoint application, so you can change the data inside that to apply some sort of processing to it. So it's done just before we send it to the integration. And it has access to the entire body, including the parameter variables. And we also build in access to the underscore.js library, and we have our own little helper library, so to make writing the scripts pretty easy. You're not just using basic JavaScript. So I'll just jump back to one of our earlier examples, right? I want to send an email after a user completes their order, right? So on the left-hand side, we have the order object, and on the right-hand side, we have what the send email webhook expects, right? And you can see there's not a whole lot of correlation between those two pieces of JSON. So we have built-in macros inside the system by default that knows how to take an order object and turn it into a send email webhook. So they're all built in by default. But if you have a pirate object and you want to turn a pirate into an email, well, then you can upload a piece of JavaScript that will make that conversion for you. Or if you want to change how exactly, if you want to pluck out custom data from your order, say you're pushing extra attributes, and you want to make sure that that data gets sent through to the send email request, then you can edit take the basic macro that the system provides, edit that, and add in extra features to do exactly what you want to do when routing the information through. So it's a very, very powerful, very flexible feature of the hub. Quick look at what a macro looks like. You can see it's pretty short. Here we're just creating the email response variable that we're going to send back. You can see we're just grabbing variables from different places. So the first line there, we're just looking at the request order email. So we're just grabbing the email value straight from the order object. Then we're calling helper methods that we provide. So in this case, we want to find the parameters. We want to find the order confirmation from address, and we want to find the order confirmation template. And again, we're just jumping through, finding different variables that we need. So the order number and the shipping address, last name, and the different totals. So here we're using the underscore library to loop through all the line items and just build up a basic string of a table of the line items that we want to send through for this particular email. And then we just send that, so we just set that email value back in the request. So with these macros, you have like the full flexibility of JavaScript with the power of underscore and our helper libraries, and you can basically, allows you to bend any message or any object from one format into the hub format that the webhook expects. And obviously that helps with all the custom attributes that you might have. So if you want to learn more about the hub, we just launched a new website, which Sean will talk about tomorrow. But there's extensive documentation available on docs/hub. So you can see we document the basic getting started guide and how to use the push API. We document all the kind of official objects that we have right now. We document all the different webhooks broken down for those objects as well. And then we also give you kind of basic integration guides. So if you're building an integration for multi-channel or for accounting or for shipping or fulfillment, we explain how you might, what patterns you need to follow to kind of implement those basic integrations. We break down all the webhooks by object. So here we're looking at the orders webhooks. So you can see the 3 different webhooks at the top. We break down, like here we're looking at the post order, and we also have a test tool. So you can jump straight into the test application. It'll give you an example payload. You can pick what the webhook is. You can give it a custom URL. there's the JSON that you'll send. You can edit that, you can hit submit, and it will process the response back. So you can test your integrations right there in the documentation. So you can be sure that what you're sending is, what you will be sent gets processed correctly, and the feedback that you're giving back is valid as well. So here you can see the response came back and it was a success, and it shows you that you gave us back JSON, and it shows the actual JSON you returned. Or in the case of a failure, it'll show you, well, you sent back the wrong attributes, or you didn't send back the attributes we expected. So you can get all that feedback. So you can really start building the integrations right there in the documentation tool. So to learn more, talk to us. Come talk to me after this, or find Sean or Josh or Brad or Andrew or Mike or any of the Spree team. We'll be happy to talk to you about the hub. And this is the most important slide of the talk. Last year in DC, we had a problem with the Spree Conf whiskey where it got lost in customs for 2 weeks before the conference, so we didn't have our custom blend. This year, we ordered it 6 weeks in advance, and it arrived 5.5 weeks early, which is fantastic. And we have a deal this year. If you would like, you can go to the guys who made the whiskey for us. That's the URL. And it's PHP. They don't use Spree. It's a shame. So you can go and buy yourself a copy of the Spree Conf whiskey if you like it, and you can see what the blending measurements there are there on the left-hand side. So if you like it, but you want to tweak it a small, but you can start with the Spree Conf whiskey, and the slide will be up later. You can get it somewhere. Tweet it. Ah, fail. I'm not good at technology. Hence the oh yeah.
There you go.
Oh.
Just hit it once. There you go. Are you ready for questions?
I'm ready for questions.
All right, so yeah, if you have questions, again, please use one of the mics so that everybody can hear.
I'll leave the whiskey up
And
on the screen.
back. Peter.
One of the parts that caught my eye that I was curious about was the security aspects with like the HMAC approach and integrating the timestamps. Can you like talk a little bit more about that as far as like what attacks are you concerned about? What things are you specifically trying to prevent?
Sure. Well, like the most common pattern for APIs in general is that you get a single key, right? And that one API key kind of gives you access to that whole system. We were concerned that if that API key were to get lost by accident, if you were testing the webhook and you accidentally pushed it to a request bin or some public source, that somebody might get access to your push API key. And once you have that push API key, you basically have free reign to do anything as that store, right? You can create orders, have them fulfilled, send emails, do lots of scary stuff. So we looked at the different patterns that were available for securing a system like that, and we settled on HMAC as being the best pattern for it. And as I said about it, it secures the exact piece of information that you intended to push, and it only allows that to be pushed for a very, very small time window. So it really is the safest way to send that push. So if you accidentally send a push request to a public source, or somebody intercepts it, if you don't use, well, you can't push not using SSL to our service. But if you were to push it somewhere else while you're in development, then there's no risk there really. Anybody else? Over here.
Hi. We run 3 different stores. Is the pricing associated by store, or can it be by organization?
I will refer that request to Josh. I do the tech, he does the money.
So, yeah, to answer that, typically it's per store, but we could talk to you about your particular situation, so just come find me after.
There's somebody else back up there as well?
Yes, we have a e-commerce store. We have that's on Spree, and our accounting system is QuickBooks, which also does our POS. And we've been told by your people that the inventory is the problem with QuickBooks Enterprise and the hub. Is that still the case?
I'm not 100% sure on that particular use case, but I can look into it and get you an answer for sure.
So
Okay.
there's a problem with QuickBooks Enterprise inventory, not with Spree's integration with QuickBooks Enterprise. So
Right, but they don't speak to one another, correct?
Well, they don't have an API to let us speak.
Oh, that's it, right, yeah. The QuickBooks don't have a public API for setting inventory, so we can't, there's no means for us to talk to QuickBooks to actually set inventory.
It's kind of like an afterthought to QuickBooks Enterprise. It's almost like it feels like, I don't know if you've noticed this when you're using it, it feels like an add-on almost. So it's sort of this own little, kind of not very well documented part of QuickBooks. So if you have a way to talk to it by API, then we can certainly
Is there a solution for that?
Would have to be on QuickBooks.
Yeah, like as a QuickBooks customer, you'd have to reach out to them and see if they have support for managing inventory via the API on their roadmap. And if that becomes available to us, then that's no problem for us to integrate with that feature.
Seems to have deprecated the entire desktop enterprise sort of thing. I mean, they put all, they seem to, just from an observation standpoint, they'd be putting all their effort into online, QuickBooks Online. So like when we try to ask them, because we have customers who want it, and you know they're non-responsive.
So does it work with the online QuickBooks then?
Yeah. But you have to check. You have to examine the online and make sure the inventory works for you.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have a integration partner that hosts the webhook endpoints themselves? So it would be more of like a, just off the top of my head, sort of like a Shopify app integration than an integration where the Spree store is supposed to write all the code to connect to the partner's API?
Sure. Like we ourselves host lots of endpoints. So the list I flashed up at the start of the presentation, they're all hosted as part of the hub. We have vendors now who are writing their own endpoints. So a couple of dropshippers build and operate their own hub endpoints. So they've adopted the format. And yeah, we have partners who are building integrations for customers specifically, and they're hosting them. The endpoint is such a simple application that it can be hosted anywhere. So you know, we really keep all the intelligence out of the endpoint, so the hosting of the endpoint itself can be very, very simple. So that concern is pretty low. You don't need to worry about where it's hosted. Really, it's just more about getting it built in the first place.
Looks like there's a couple in back.
All right.
There.
Well, you mentioned hosting endpoints. Is that the pattern you recommend, or versus the pattern of building a plugin or extension for that particular application? Like Magento, you could build a module that is the endpoint and is hosted by the actual place where you want to put the data or take the data.
Yeah. It would depend on what application you're integrating with. Like if you're integrating with a custom application that you have control of, and you can just add on a couple of URLs or endpoints to that application, then that makes perfect sense, right? To push it there. In a lot of cases, the integrations are being built for third-party systems where the endpoint just acts as a bridge, right, between the hub and that target system. So depending on what system you're integrating with, yeah, the hosting can change.
I guess this is more for Josh, is on pricing. It's a little bit, it's a great service, and I've used it on one store and started using it. Since it's a bit pricey for new companies or even startups that want to get on using Spree, have you thought about usage-based pricing at all?
Yeah, short answer to that is yes, we have. We're looking at new pricing models that we could do. The issue with usage-based is some feedback we've gotten has been around not wanting to feel like you're paying on like a per order basis. So there's a lot of people who prefer sort of a flat fee pricing. We are looking at the potential for potentially creating like an entry-level type plan with some kind of limits around it so that you can kind of grow into the larger plans. But then, we have to think about what would those limits be, right? What's going to make sense for a store as part of that? So I'd love to have that conversation with you to get your thoughts on that. Why don't we do one more question?
Yeah.
So I'm new to Spree, and we're looking to migrate in the next 6 months. And I guess looking at this, is Commerce Hub expected to be a developer-only tool, or do you see that actually having an interface to the operations team where they might log in and manage these? Main question being, will the developer have full responsibility over maintaining this and making sure that all the orders get transferred to the proper places?
Sure. Yeah, the interface that we're showing there is both, right? We're definitely targeting the interface for two different use cases. One is like the store owners or the CSR team are able to go in and look at the orders and see what the orders are doing. So seeing that notifications tab and that nice string of events is definitely targeted towards the CSR team. Obviously, getting in and resolving the issues, because in a lot of cases it's quite a complicated problem that may be causing the issue, then that's obviously more of a developer tool. So I guess it's a mix between the CSRs being able to see what's going on, or the store owners being able to see what's going on, and do basic configuration around, like adding a new integration. If it's an off-the-shelf integration, like for NetSuite or something, turning that on, it's very simple. It's a couple of clicks on an interface. You fill in a couple of configuration variables, and it's turned on. So a store owner could do that, no problem. It's when you get into the custom development aspect and doing custom endpoints or troubleshooting odd behavior of endpoints that the developer would have to jump in, or somebody slightly more technical would need to jump in and be able to troubleshoot those issues.
All right, Brian, thanks
Thank you
very much.